Hey, so I've been reading this book called None Dare Call It Treason by Congressman John Stormer. He was a Missouri state congressman, and this book is intense. And when he's talking about things that's been in place for, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, this book's from 1964. I mean, the events that took place that are documented in this book are so far beyond being established that they have invaded pretty much everything. It's to the point where people are carrying out an agenda they're not even aware exists. And so I'm just going to read some of the things that I highlighted from the 12th chapter in this book on economics and government. It says, a people may want a free government, but if from insolence or carelessness or cowardice or want of public spirit they are unequal to the exertions necessary for preserving it, if they will not fight for it when it is directly attacked, if they can be deluded by the artifices used to cheat them out of it, if by momentary discouragement or temporary panic or a fit of enthusiasm for an individual they can be induced to lay their liberties at the feet of even a great man, or trust him with powers which enable him to subvert their institutions, in all of these cases they are more or less unfit for liberty. And though it may be for their good to have had it, even for a short time, they are unlikely long to enjoy it. John Stuart Mill. And so from that point, I'm just going to read the stuff that really stood out to me. It says, government has been the ultimate goal of the collectivist thinkers who have been infiltrating every segment of American life for 60 years. Passage of the 16th Amendment in 1913, which that's the income tax amendment, gave the federal government and its managers unrestricted access to the wealth of the American citizens. Fabian indoctrinated theorists and professors from college campuses started out with there just being a little bit of them, and then they flooded colleges. And just to give you an idea, you've got the Fabians, the Fabian school of thought. This is originated in Europe. Those type of people, they believe in a passive aggressive means of bringing about a new world order and basically a socialist or communist style collectivist government. And then you got the Marxists who will use any means necessary and they'll be violent. And the Fabians won't actually they won't say, oh, that's wrong, don't use violence, because that violent means achieves the ultimate ends that they're looking to accomplish, which is a global collectivist world order. So anyhow, it's talking about people that are department heads at Harvard in 1961, and he says economics is one thing, politics is another. No one has criticized the president for lack of political acumen. I've seen no evidence that Congress is prepared to go along with large deficits except for security reasons, but no administration has advanced as far as the Kennedy administration in accepting Keynesian economics. What is Keynesian economics? John Maynard Keynes, a British Fabian economist, he says that the vehicle for buying the votes in support of the masses is using their own money against them. He wrote, his major work was The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. And he wrote to George Bernard Shaw, who was the founder of the Fabian School of Thought. He said, I believe myself to be writing a book on economic theory which will largely revolutionize the way the world thinks about economic problems. The Keynes brand of socialism differs from Marxism. It advocates strict control of the means of production, hi Odell, and the supply of credit and money rather than government ownership. Change everything except for outward appearance. And that's one of the things that we're dealing with today in the United States, is everything looks to be like it's okay on the surface, but there are underlying issues that are rotting us socially from the inside out, and it's being done on purpose. Okay, the world is not the way it is by accident. This next quote that I'm going to read portions of is from John Strachey, who was a British Fabian in 1943. He was the war minister in the Labour government of Great Britain in 1950. He explains Keynes' theories in this way. Capitalism should be regulated and controlled by a central authority. The principal instruments of its policy should be variations in the rate of interest, budgetary deficits and surpluses, public works, and redistribution of personal incomes in equalitarian direction. This positive side of Keynes's work requires an authority to do the regulating, and that the authority can be in contemporary conditions nothing else but the government of a nation state. He goes on to say that the nominal owners of the means of production, although left in full possession of the legal title to their property, would in reality be working not for themselves, but for whatever hands grasped the central levers of social control. For Keynes had rashly shown that those levers had only to be pulled and pushed this way and that in order to manipulate the system at will. Once proud possessors of the means of production would find themselves in effect but agents and managers on behalf of the community. Folks, this is one of the reasons why even if you own your own business, you're getting taxed to death. You're getting hammered at every angle. You own it, okay, in some sense, but really nobody really owns anything because they've taken away the people's ability to be independent from the system that exists to control us. And then it goes on to talk about a guy named Felix Frankfurter, who was a Supreme Court justice, and he also was a Harvard professor. And it talks about how Frankfurter and Walter Lippmann, they were both professors at Harvard, and it talks about how they were able to have a lot of influence on our society and the government because their students found themselves in influential government positions. One of those people was Alger Hiss, who is confirmed through congressional hearings and was charged as a communist conspirator, but he never was really truly punished, and they never were able to weed them out. I know that in the history books they make Joseph McCarthy out to be a crazy person, but really he was not crazy. He went crazy because he knew the truth. He saw the fruit, and he was showing people the fruit, and too many people couldn't grasp it because the journalistic powers that be and the people who even at that time in the 50s and 60s and even before that into the all the way back, I mean everything from the time that the turn of the 1900s happened, like they really manipulated people's perception of reality through the news sources. Okay, they've been doing that for a while, and it goes on in this book that I'm reading. It talks about how they've turned propaganda into a science. Manipulating the people's minds is a scientific endeavor, and they're able to. They know how to do it. They know how to push people's buttons and influence the herd to move a particular direction, and a big part of that is the product of education. Earlier in this book, they talk about education, and the designs of education really were intended to reduce an individual's unique personality traits and aspirations to not exist, so that you would have so few outliers that would buck the agenda of the system, and you would have an abundance of people that would just follow the herd and go along, because that would be easier for the government to control the entire body of people if they can just play whack-a-mole with the few people that stick their heads up above the ground to say, hey, this isn't right what they're directing us to do. This is bad. This is not beneficial to the things that we say that we want to see manifest in our lives. And then you just have masses of people, and it's intimidating for some people to actually stand up against a whole group of people and say you're wrong. But really, we have to have that, and then we have to have masses of people say, hey, you know what, that one person that was willing to stand up, or those 5 or 10, 25, 100, now that becomes the dominant movement in a society, and then you can shift public perception to go in a good direction. So that's really where we're at. I mean, God has given us escape routes from the things that are being done, but we have to be diligent in not just understanding what happened in the past, but we also have to have our eyes and minds open to see the ways that we should go moving forward. And it really, a big part of it comes through awareness and being aware of the conditions that exist and just thinking simply about how to do things better. Okay, our education system in the United States is garbage. The public school system has been infiltrated. It says here in this book, and I don't think I'm going to continue reading on beyond what I've already read, but it talks about this man who went to a dinner party in Washington, D.C. with all of these government employees. One of the ladies that worked there had been in, at the Department of Education since 1919, and they essentially told them that they had hijacked them and other communist infiltrators had hijacked FDR's New Deal program, and they were essentially going to use it to be able to achieve their means of establishing a collective estate. And really, that's kind of where we're at. But the reason why they've established a collective estate is so that they could have control over the resources, create dependence, and then dominate society and be able to just take everything over. Because think about it, like in the Great Depression era, most people understood how to provide for their own basic needs. But you look at where we're at today, and most people just do not have the capacity to provide for their own food and water and surely not electricity. I mean, I'm pretty well versed in the basic necessities of life, and if everything was to go completely chaotic, I like my chances of being able to survive. And for my family to be able to survive just out of the abundance of things I've come to know in my lifetime. But I don't even know how to generate my own electricity. That's beyond my own capabilities. And so you see the trends that have happened and the things that have taken place for well over 100 years. And this book right here, I highly recommend people try to find it online. I've seen them for $28 online. And it's sold millions of copies. I'm pretty sure this book is really old. This one's really from 1964. I have to be really, really careful with it to not break it. But the information in here is gold. It tells you exactly what was done to lead us to this point. And it is concerning, especially seeing how many people just choose to stay tuned into La La Land instead of engaging in this animated contest of liberty. I mean, this is life. We get one life. Average life expectancy is 657,000 hours. That's 75 years. You have to live to be 114 years old to get 1 million hours of life. And it's worth it to engage. This escaping reality and just feeding ourselves sensual pleasures and just the fun things of life ultimately aren't going to leave us fulfilled at the end. And so we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to others to continue aiming to be informed, continue to discuss the things that matter, even in uncomfortable situations. You know, we go into public, and I'm always looking to talk about things that matter. And I can tell it makes people uncomfortable, but I've conditioned myself to be comfortable with the idea of discomfort, not just physically, but also mentally. And so when I get in those situations, I aim to be able to read people. And man, it's like people are self-conscious about the fact that they don't know as much as they know that they should. And that's really disheartening. We've got to turn away from some of these things that we do for fun, things that seem innocent enough. Stop being such fanboys of sports, being such fanboys of the easy life. And we've got to turn and go a different direction, or the plans of these wicked and evil men are going to come to fruition in full, and it's going to be beyond the ability of repair. At a certain point, God's going to just let it be handed over, and it's going to be what it's going to be, and it'll be a difficult road to redemption at that point. So anyway, look up the book, None Dare Call It Treason. There's absolute gold as far as information goes. It's incredibly well sourced, and I mean it for its time, in the 1960s, it's telling you what we're living in today. So have a good one. God bless.